Oh, okay, good morning, everybody. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Okay, so we're on page 162 in the Path of the Just, chapter 10, we're dealing with the trait of Nikios, the trait of cleanliness. And as I mentioned, cleanliness does not mean hygiene. We don't have a chapter here on flossing and, and using deodorant or whatever. This is something much more sophisticated, much more spiritual than that. It's about the kios, cleanliness is about doing a deep analysis, investigation into our own lives, our own qualities, our own attributes, our own actions, our own emotions, our own thoughts, and trying to understand and make sure that everything is going in the right direction. Sort of like you have your annual checkup at the doctor, where you do general some general blood work, and you make sure that your numbers aren't too high, everything's more or less healthy. Then you have the Nikios, which is taking each one of those individual levels, your glucose level, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, and doing a deeper test to make sure that it's right where you want it to be, that it's exactly the way you need it to be. So that's what Nikios is. Nikios is going more specific and further refining our meetings, our qualities of our nature. Okay, so if you look on page 162, we're on the bottom of 162, where it says, although Nikios, like Zahirus, involves ridding oneself of wrongdoing, because in essence, that's what Nikios is. It's making sure that we're not making mistakes in our lives, that we're not treating people, important people in our lives in the wrong way, to make sure that that in our relationship with Hashem, we're not making major errors. That's similar to Zahirus, but a Nucky is somebody who practices this attribute, takes this to a higher level. Okay, he further refines his actions. Let's see. You can see now the difference between a Zahir. Zahir is the person we discussed earlier in chapters 2 to 5. A Zahir is somebody who's careful. The Hebrew needs to be careful. He's careful with what he does. He's careful with what he says. He's careful with what he eats. He's careful with what he looks at. That's a Zahir. And then you have a Naki. Naki is even higher, an even higher level. Even though the traits they embody are conceptually similar to each other, the Zahir is the one who is careful in his deeds and sees to it that he does not sin in that which is already known to him and is common knowledge that is a sin. Okay, so a Zahir, the lower level, he's already reached a level where he's being careful with what he eats. Let's say, he might not be, maybe he's not eating shellfish anymore, or maybe he's not mixing milk and meat. He's doing a general level of kashrut, just using this as an example. Or if you want to use Shabbat as an example, a Zahir might be someone who's basically at this point, he's observing Shabbat, he's being careful, to do things the way they're meant to be done. That's a Zahir. But a Naki is now going to take that to the next level, right? We never want to be complacent or satisfied with where we are. Physically and materially, the goal is to be satisfied and satiated. You cannot need more. You cannot want and desire. Right now I'm in a mall. If you can see, I don't know if you guys have ever seen what a mall in Jerusalem looks like. I'll show you. Show you what a mall in Jerusalem looks like. Okay. This is materialism at its best. Get that. Okay. Can you see this? Packed. Malls are packed with people shopping, okay, buying things. There's a lot of materialism in Jerusalem. I have plenty of it. But the Nucky is somebody who says, okay, in terms of material pleasures, in terms of what we're buying, what we need to survive, we should be satisfied. We should be complacent. We shouldn't always need the newest iPhone, the latest pair of shoes, the newest suit that just came out, whatever it is. I'm looking around the stores. But but when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to spiritual growth, the opposite is true. We never want to be satisfied. We never want to be, okay, you know what? I'm good. I reached this level. I'm keeping a basic level of this. I'm keeping a basic level of that. I'm more or less, I'm doing Shabbos now. I wasn't 5 years ago. Anaki says, okay, that's amazing. I took this incredible step, but it's not time to stop growing. I take it to another level and I further refine it and I further improve it and I further develop whatever it is that I've been working on for all these years. I don't stop. I don't say, okay, good. I reached my place, hit my level. No, in our relationship with Hashem and in our spiritual investment, always want to keep going. There's a Yiddish word that we say a lot in yeshiva, weiter. Weiter means keep going, weiter, and keep going, you don't stop. So however, I'm on 163. However, he's not yet a master over himself to the extent that his heart will not be drawn by natural desire, so that such desire might not incline his heart to rationalize and show him dubious permits in various matters whose evil nature is not commonly known. In other words, okay, I've got some basic fundamentals down, but on the more subtle level, on the more refined level, my Yetzer Hara is going to definitely convince me that it's okay. This is okay. You can enjoy this. You can like this is harmless. Hashem doesn't really care if I take it to this level. And it's very easy to rationalize and justify what we're doing. Well, the Nucky is not going to stop there. He's not going to stop at that level. He's going to take it further. And this rationalization comes about because even though he tries sincerely to overcome his evil inclination and to suppress his desires for prohibiting things, he will not, as a result of such suppression, change his essential nature. Okay? We don't become different people essentially. We don't change our essential nature when we stop, doing things that we're not supposed to do. If a person says, okay, you know what, I'm not going to eat cook, I'm not going to eat shellfish anymore. I'm not going to drive on Shabbos anymore. Whatever it is that a person is doing, it doesn't change my essential nature. Nikias is trying to go deeper. We're actually changing your nature. We're changing the deeper part of yourself. And therefore, a person who hasn't yet gone to that level will not be able to remove from his heart the physical desire itself, but only to overcome it in each particular instance and to follow the dictates of wisdom rather than the demands of his desire. After I've invested and I've worked for myself, I will have the ability to make the right choice. Okay, you know what? If you're tempted to look at something inappropriate on social media, I'm going to overcome that desire. It doesn't mean I've uprooted the desire. It means I've it doesn't mean that it's no longer a part of me. It means that right now I'm choosing consciously to make the decision not to do it because it's not right, because it's not good for you, because it's not healthy for you. That's the lower level, but the desire is still there. I still have that urge every time Facebook comes on to scroll down and look at that reel that I shouldn't look at. Or I still have that desire every time I'm in the food court to just get something to eat, maybe some fries, but not meat, or maybe some cheese pizza or whatever it is. The desire is still there, and I'm going to overcome it, or I'm not going to overcome it, and that's the challenge. However, in any event, when desire is overcome by the dictates of wisdom, the darkness of physicality still does its work of trying to incite and entice him to rationalize and commit subtle sins. Right? That the Yetzer Hara doesn't stop. The Yetzer Hara doesn't leave me alone at this point. But this eventually changes. As I graduate from Zahirus to Nikius, I'm now starting to slowly even uproot some of the things. So like I might walk by that McDonald's and you know what? I'm not fighting my urge to go in. It doesn't even look good to me anymore. I don't even want to get in the car on Shabbos anymore. I don't even want to, look at that inappropriate thing on Facebook anymore. Whatever it is that I'm working on, whatever area that I'm trying to grow in, when I hit the level of Zahirus, it's not that I'm fighting to overcome the drive toward that thing. I don't even want it anymore. And by the way, that's totally possible. It's possible to get there. You don't have to be some great spiritual giant to get there. If you keep working on something and you keep doing it or not doing it, depending whether it's something you're working on doing or something that you're working on avoiding, and you do it for a while, and you're thoughtful about it, and you're mindful about it, then eventually you will overcome the severe. That's what he talks about here on 164. When Paul goes on to explain how this changes as one progresses from Zahirus and Zerizus to Nikius. Okay, here we go. However, after a person habituates himself greatly in this trait of Zahirus, to the point that he has achieved the first stage of cleansing himself, namely from the well-known sins, and he habituates himself in the divine service, and there's reasons required for it. And as a result of this, the love for his creator and the craving to be close to him will intensify within him. The power of this habituation will distance himself from matters of physicality and make his intellect cleave to spiritual perfection. There's a process that takes place. There's a process that takes place as you go down the spiritual journey, the journey of spiritual greatness. Eventually, you'll notice that what you want, what you yearn for, what excites you, what gets you out of bed in the morning, will start to change. And let's say making the decision to daven every morning. At first, that might seem like a task that is, overwhelming, or I'm going to do it, but I don't enjoy it, and it's meaningless to me. But I know I'm supposed to do it. And if you do it for a while, and you commit to it, and you learn about it, and you understand it, eventually you'll get to a point where you crave it. You couldn't imagine starting a day without talking to Hashem first. You couldn't imagine what a day would be like that didn't involve putting on my tefillin or saying the morning blessings or yearning to or connecting to Hashem in a meaningful way in the beginning of the day. So that who you are starts to change. And like anything else, like when you're learning how to run a marathon, or you're training to anything like that. In the beginning, you have to push and push and push and push against your nature. And eventually your nature starts to change. And you start to desire that thing, you start to crave that. That is what happens as this transformation takes place.
David?
Yes. Yes. All right.
I thought that what happens is as the transformation takes place, the Yetzer Hara has to get stronger and starts tempting you in different ways. In other words, it not only what you do, but now you've got to deal with what you think. In other words, the bar goes higher and higher and higher.
You're right. So that's for sure true. That's a good point. The Yetzer Hara grows as I grow. The Yetzer Hara is also growing, and keeping the challenge and keeping the tension alive on the friction. But also at the same time, and the reason why the Yetzer Hara has to grow is because something's changing inside of me. Right? If I'm not changing internally, then the Yetzer Hara doesn't have to do anything. The Yetzer Hara can keep it at the same volume that it's at. the same
right.
intensity. But because I'm changing, because I'm transforming inside, so now in order to keep the test and keep the opportunity for growth and the friction and the opposition alive so that I can continue to grow, the Yetzer Hara will continue to grow with me.
But the HRR also has to grow to give you free will.
Exactly, that's why. Not also, that is why. That's why the Yetzer Hara has to grow. Because if the Yetzer Hara doesn't grow as I'm growing, then I eventually outgrow my free will. And if I outgrow my free will, then my whole purpose of being here, which is to use my free will to choose to connect to Hashem, is no longer there. It's undermined. And my purpose is no longer on earth.
Right.
Okay, so let me see what's going on. Oh, we need to talk a little louder. Yeah, Susan. Okay. Go ahead, Susan. Oh, you're on mute. Susan, you're on mute.
How does your Bechira point fit into this? Because it sounds to me like you have a challenge, you strive to reach their challenge or overcome their challenge, and then it no longer is it. Then it doesn't feel like a challenge anymore.
So that doesn't feel like a challenge anymore. But a more refined level of that same area that you're working on now becomes the next area of challenge, right? So let's say you're working on Shabbos, okay? So after enough years, right, I think it's fair to assume that, that's there might be something going on in the family or a reunion or whatever, but you're not even tempted, or it doesn't even cross your mind at this point that you're going to get in the car and you're going to drive to to go visit your whatever on Shabbos. It's just that's past your, that's already so far, you're so far beyond that challenge that that's not where you're struggling. But there's a more refined level of Shabbos that you might be struggling, whatever it is, and that, putting on makeup or not putting on makeup, or or whatever. I don't know. Just so you're still working and growing in that area. Then the Hughes level is the basic fundamental level of the mitzvah. And then the keyest level is when you get to the more fine-tuned area.
Thank you.
So this process will continue until he will ultimately be able to attain the state of complete cleansing from any improper desire or trace of sin. Now, obviously, that doesn't happen in one lifetime. And if you want to isolate one area maybe that you're working on, you probably can, in one area get to the point where where you don't feel any desire at all for the transgression, but you still have other areas, okay, in which the fire of bodily desire will be extinguished from his heart through the craving for the divine that is intensified within him. That's a very important line. Look at note number 5. As the latter intensifies, the latter meaning the desire for connection to Hashem, the former is automatically diminished. Ultimately, the craving for the divine becomes dominant, and the fire of bodily desire is stilled. That's the process in a nutshell. As you become closer and closer to Hashem, you begin to uncover and to desire, and you begin to uncover what Hashem is. As you get closer, what happens is you want more closeness. You want to get even closer, because the closer you get, the more you're able to have insight and to understand what that divine connection looks like and what it feels like and what it means and what it represents in my life. And then I just want more of it. So it's a process. It's a process of a positive cycle where as I'm working and overcoming the bodily desire in one particular area, and then as a result, I'm coming closer to Hashem. As I come closer to Hashem, I want that sparks in me a desire to come even closer to Hashem. So it's this positive cycle that we're talking about over here. And then his perception will remain unclouded, pure, and clear, as I wrote above in the beginning of this chapter, so that he will not be enticed and he will remain beyond the reach of the darkness of his physicality, and he will be entirely cleansed from any trace of sin in whatever he does. Okay, so it sounds like an impossible level, but the truth is, it's really not. It's really not. It's just taking one area of our service of Hashem to its fullest. It's actually something I recommend considering, which is picking one area, like as a whole, we try to I don't know if we try to, but we tend to, and it's probably a good thing and a healthy thing. We grow slowly. Our rabbis and our teachers and our mentors advise us to grow slowly. We don't want to go too fast or too far because that can have a backlash. It can have a fallout. It can affect other people. But I recommend picking one area of Yiddishkeit, one area of Jewish life, where you just go all in and you never ever stop growing. Now, of course, that should be an area that you enjoy, right? If you love Shabbos, then commit to always be working on better Shabbos and service. More careful with the 39 categories of work. Whatever the area is where you feel you can do it, whatever the mitzvah is that you can make yours, everyone should have one mitzvah. So that when you look at somebody, you say, "Oh, that guy, he's a Shabbos yid," or that woman, she's a kashrus yid, or whatever it is. That person, he's a davener, and that's your one area where you're known because you invest and you don't stop growing in that one area. Everyone should have one area. That person, he's a learner. He learns and he learns and he's always improving and working to get deeper and deeper understanding in his learning. That's a really, really important thing. Just pick one area where you're not going to be balanced. I'm a big believer in balanced Yiddishkeit. I've been preaching it, teaching it, and preaching it my whole career. But I also think you should have one area where you're not balanced, one area where you're meshuggah. And allow yourself to be meshuggah in one area. Okay. Any thoughts about
David?
Yes.
So what are tzaddiks tempted by? I mean, what do they really have to struggle against?
First of all, it's different for every tzaddik, but one thing's for sure: if you're alive, you're struggling. If you're alive, you're struggling. For some tzaddikim, it could be, probably for a lot of them, it's probably arrogance. When I've reached the level where I'm a big top rabbi and everyone's seeking my wisdom and everyone's following my direction and following my advice, maybe I have a challenge where I might start to feel like, hey, look, I'm God. Look at me. I don't know. It's gonna be different for everyone. Some tzaddikim, I think some tzaddikim struggle with, physical desires. I think some tzaddikim struggle with sexual desires. I think that that those things don't necessarily go away. So it's different for everybody. It's different for everybody. I'll let you know when I get there.
I'm not holding my breath.
Appreciate that. Okay. Let's go. Anyone else have any thoughts on that up to this point? What do you guys think about this idea that I'm throwing out now about overall be very balanced and thought out and weighed in your growth in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, in Jewish observance, and factor in everything that needs to be factored in: your children, your parents, your community, your own, your relationship, your spouse. Factor it all in, but pick one area where you just go meshuggah, where you go all in, where you go 100%, Yes, Les, what do you got?
I think that that makes a lot of sense because what it does is it challenges an inclination to get static, to get kind of sunk into a particular narrative that defines you. And by pushing the limit in one area, it expands your confidence and therefore your motivation to try to do better in other areas as well. There's one other thing that I was thinking of as you were talking, and that is as one becomes more refined, they achieve a higher level. There are issues that may not even be visible, which become overridingly important. For example, the tzaddik that you were talking about, the rabbi who's attained a lot of status, his main issue may be rolling his eyes when he gets impatient hearing somebody say something. And for him, that may be as difficult an obstacle as it is for a criminal who's at a very low basis to rob somebody without causing physical damage.
You sound a lot like Rabbi Dessler right now, Les. Rabbi Lessler. Okay. That's exactly right. That's the example that he uses. And that's I think that's a great one. Like when you're on that level, how do you not look down on people? I'm sure I told you this story, but I had a teacher in yeshiva. Guy was absolutely brilliant. I mean, this guy was super duper genius. And he knew incredible amounts of Torah. And he was a teacher of ours. And he was not a very good teacher because he had a really hard time coming down to the level of his students without getting frustrated. And he used to get incredibly frustrated with us when we didn't understand what he was talking about. And I remember once I went down to get a coffee. There was a little bit like a little coffee corner in yeshiva. I went down there and I saw him. As I was coming down the stairs, I saw him down there. And he was sort of, pacing back and forth. I could picture him right now, mumbling to himself. And I had enough chutzpah to kind of sneak up a little bit behind him and try to understand, make out what he was saying. And I caught it. I figured out what he was saying. This is what he was saying. He kept saying it over and over again. This is what he was saying. He's saying, monkeys. They're all a bunch of monkeys. They're all a bunch of monkeys. So he was clearly referring to us, his students, right? He had so much disdain for us and so little respect for our intellect. And and he was obviously not a great teacher. So that's a good example, right? When you're on that level, how do you deal with your common man who's 100 levels below you intellectually and spiritually, and still find something special about them and have awe for them and appreciate what they have to contribute and their uniqueness? I think that's a good example of a challenge that a tzaddik.
But Rabbi,
That's
I think that there's a tremendous amount of irony in that. I mean, the one abhorrent trait that permeates prayer books, that permeates Talmud, that I've seen is arrogance. And for a tzaddik to be arrogant seems to be very ironic.
Yeah, of course, right, exactly. And by the way, I just want to say I'm not in the business of determining who is a tzaddik and who isn't a tzaddik, and how many of the mitzvahs do you have to be killing it in to be called a tzaddik, and how many can you be royally glowing and still be a tzaddik, and but the bottom line is, if you're alive, you're being challenged. You have a challenge in some area of spiritual growth. So I don't know. Most of the people that I've known in my life that I've looked up to, that have that I consider to be tzaddikim or close. I find them to be very, very, by definition, as you're saying, Jeff, very humble people. And if there was an element of arrogance to them, then I wouldn't look at them as being a tzaddik. I wouldn't even consider them to be a tzaddik. So, so you're right. I think you're right. But there's got to be something that means that tzaddik is struggling with. If it's not arrogance, or if it's not whatever, there's got to be some area that's a challenge. Because if there weren't, if he's not being tested anymore, then he'd be in Shemayim. Scott, what do you got?
So one thought that really struck home with me was about going all in and sacrificing is the path that we've taken for getting our kids to young adulthood. That is, like, to me, it's the biggest challenge I've ever had in my life. And it changes like daily with that.
That's 100% correct. And you do it with your kids, right? You go all in with your kids. You're not like, you know what? I'm gonna be a decent dad. Right? No one says that. You know, no one says that. I mean, there are people that say that. No one, people that we know don't say that. People that we know say, I'm gonna go all in. If anything, we go all in too far with our kids sometimes. And err that way. But then if you take that, Scott, and you translate it to, you know, Jewish observance, mitzvah observance, let's say, it's a very worthwhile thought to take one area, whether it's Shabbat, and by the way, Shabbat might be way too big of a category. It might be one aspect of Shabbat. Maybe it's Friday night, or maybe it's Shabbat morning davening, or whatever it is. We'll pick a different area. Maybe it's kashrut. Again, kashrut is too big, so maybe it's you start with something, one area that is doable.
Lunch.
Kashrut in the home, or one meal a day, whatever it is. But pick one area where you're going all in, and like Les said, you know, it gives you it'll give you that energy and sort of stimulus to know that you still have it in you to grow and to become awesome in an area of Jewish life. And then you can pick another area of Jewish life and do it again, because you know you've done it once, and you'll do it again. And if you do that enough times, then you know you're a tzaddik. And then we'll ask you what your Yitzhahara is, and you'll tell us.
David, How
Steve, are you
about-
about to say something? I just want to make sure everyone who wants to. Steve,
Go
is that-
ahead, and
is
then
that
I'll
you?
go after.
Okay. Go ahead, Jeff.
yeah, but what about the teachings that even the smallest mitzvot are important because you don't know what Hashem's plan is. So if you neglect something that is in your mind less important than something else, you could be missing the opportunity that Hashem is providing for you to do something that you don't realize is even happening. So the overemphasis on one thing, you could, because
Yeah, so
that's
that-
human
It's a
nature,
great point.
overlook some of the small ones.
Okay, so I think that's an excellent point. And I'm not advocating necessarily, you know, ignoring all the other mentions and picking one and going all in and doing just that. But I'm talking about a strategy, right? I mean, the goal, obviously, ultimately, the goal for every one of us is ultimate connection to Hashem. That's absolutely ultimate possible for us as individuals. And that's going to come from our commitment and our connection to all of the mitzvahs, because the mitzvahs are the pathway to connect to Hashem. So ultimately, total commitment on every level to every one of the mitzvahs is where one would ideally love to get. I'm talking about how to get there, right? How to get there. You can't just get there. You can't just one day wake up and say, okay, that's it. You know, I'm done. I'm done living like this. And from now on, from this point on, I am 100% all in on every mitzvah. You can't do that, right? So I'm suggesting taking a balanced, measured approach to your growth, always trying to grow and expand in all the areas of Jewish life, but then picking one area at the same time that you're going all in on, not to the expense of the other mitzvahs, but one area that I'm trying to, you know, fully invest in.
That's kind of what I was going to talk about. Like one thing, when I came back from Israel, I started to do the Modeh Ani and Shema every morning. So you can't say I'm going to do every blessing for 3 hours every morning. It's like I started with just those two small ones, and then you can build on that. So I think you have to pick a goal that you're going to be able to obtain to build on to get to the next level. Like you're saying, if you pick, I'm going to be 100% kosher from now on, when you've never kept kosher at all, I think that's going to be a hard path.
Yeah, exactly. So there's two things. There's one, which is generally as we approach our growth in the mitzvahs, we want to grow in a smart, balanced, measured way. We want to, put the pressure on, but not too much pressure. We want to challenge ourselves, but not to the point where we're going to end up, rebelling against our decisions and it's going to backfire. So that's a general measured approach, step by step, little by little. But then I'm saying, in addition to all that, pick one area where that you love, that you're excited about, that you want to be known as, wow. And that mitzvah, Steve was an unbelievable side. You went all the way in that mitzvah, right? I think I know which mitzvah you would pick, Steve. But I'm not going to say that. Okay. Anyway, let's go. Let's do a little bit more over here. I got a few minutes until page 160. The Ramchal explains that it was perfection of this trait that David HaMelech, spoke about in Tehillim. Okay, so we know that from our already 165 pages, 10 chapters into the Ramchal. We know what the Ramchal, we know we have his style down. He takes a particular trait, midah, attribute quality, he defines it, and then he starts to break it down into its component parts. And then inevitably he's going to start to weave into it proof and support from the text. And almost always, in every case, one of the places that he turns to support his thesis or to back up his notion is the Psalms, King David, David HaMelech. In Tehillim, David HaMelech basically covers every human emotion, every human quality, every dimension of greatness that exists in potential for a Jew, and he addresses it somewhere. So if you were to take the 150 chapters of Psalms and study them and break them down phrase by phrase, sentence by sentence, you'll basically have everything you need to know about how to live as a Jew. So just like in all the other areas that we've discussed, Ramchal turns to King David, to find where in his Psalms he is referring to this idea of Nikius. And he says, behold, it was regarding his perfection of this trait that David HaMelech rejoined in his statement and said, Erchatz benikayon kapai va'asovava et mizbechacha Hashem. I wash my hands in purity. And the word for that in Hebrew is nikayon, which is this trait of nikiyut, the same quality of cleanliness that we're talking about. And I circle around your altar, Hashem. What does this mean? Let's see what he says. For in truth, only one who is completely cleansed from any trace of transgression and iniquity is the one who is suited to see the presence of the King Hashem, allowing you to stand in his presence. If there's one sentence that describes everything that we're trying to achieve with this book, and really one sentence that describes everything we're trying to achieve in our lives as Jews, it's to stand in the presence of Hashem. Right? That's the goal. So in order to stand in the presence of Hashem, we have to refine our traits, we have to refine our characteristics, we have to refine our actions, and ultimately get to the place of nikius, of purity and cleanliness. So without this cleansing, one must be only ashamed and embarrassed before him. Right? If there's all kinds of things that I'm living with, deep dark secrets that I'm living with. Yosef, deep dark secrets that I'm living with, that even if they're not deep dark secrets, but there are areas in my life that I know I'm really failing miserably. Interpersonal mitzvahs, or if it's a mitzvah between me and Hashem, it's very hard to stand in the presence of Hashem without feeling a sense of embarrassment. So in order to be able to stand in the presence of Hashem, I have to know that I'm clean, that I'm nucky, that I've cleansed myself. Like the idea contained in the statement of Ezra. Ezra was the leader of the Jewish people during the period of time after the destruction of the first temple, leading up to the period of the second temple. Ezra himself made a confession. He says, Elokai, boshti v'nichlamti, harin Elokai, panai lecha. My God, I am embarrassed and ashamed to lift my face to you, my God. But this is Ezra. Ezra HaSofer, one of the great tzaddikim, one of the most important leaders in Jewish history, one of the greatest rabbis and scholars that ever lived. He himself says, on his level, he was embarrassed and ashamed to lift up his face before Hashem. He was embarrassed and ashamed to stand before Hashem because he knew that there was stuff that he was carrying with him that he was embarrassed about, that he could do better. There were areas in his life that he knew that he wasn't achieving the most that he could achieve. Let's just finish this. Although essential, the kiss is not easily applied. Okay, we need to point this out. This is no simple endeavor. Now, certainly, it is a great undertaking for a person to achieve perfection in this trait, the trait of the kiss. For the recognized and well-known sins are relatively easy for a person to avoid since their impropriety is obvious. But the scrupulousness required for attaining the kiss is the more difficult challenge because the heart's rationalization hides the subtle sin, as I've written. When we're talking about subtleties, it becomes much easier to rationalize. Right? When we're talking about little things, does Hashem really, really care if I, send a text on Shabbos to somebody who could, use it on this word? I mean, after all, what is Shabbos about? Shabbos is about spirituality. Isn't it a spiritual thing to send a message to somebody who's, needs a little encouragement or who could use a little support? So when you get down to the finer levels, the more subtle levels of commitment, it becomes much easier to rationalize our actions. And that's what Nikias is about. Nikias is learning how to be real and be honest and not rationalize our actions, but to really commit to full-blown, all-in action and endeavor in certain areas. But again, my recommendation is to only try this in one specific area, not to try it in a multitude of areas, because that's not going to end. Okay. I think we'll stop here. Let's see if there's any questions or discussion, and maybe stop it. Anybody have anything that they want to?
David, I think
Brenda?
I don't know if this really qualifies as going all in because it sounds a little materialistic, but our motive was to create a sanctuary in our home, a private place. And that meant we didn't even have a challah board. We didn't even have Jewish art. And we didn't even have mezuzahs. So just starting that way, we decided to go slowly all in and just creating a Shabbos table. We didn't even know how to do that, and learning the prayers. And so I don't know if that's exactly right, but
I think that's exactly what we're talking about. But my challenge is if let's say Friday night Shabbat dinner is your happy place. That's one area of Yiddishkeit that you just love, and it's just so special to you. So don't ever stop working on making it better, right? In other words, I mean, I guess there comes a point where there's not much more you can do, and then maybe you switch to another mitzvah. But it's in picking one area where you're improving. And when I say improving, I don't just mean making it more meaningful and more. I don't think you could make it more delicious than you already do, but I also mean making it more authentic, and more halachically correct, and whatever the details are, the areas that you could go a little further, you know, that's the
Invite
key.
people.
Well, no, they already invite plenty of people, but of course that's part of it too. But you know, and I mean, you know, I know, yeah, there's always, I know my own shop is maybe, you know, there's a lot more I could do, both in the area of making it more inspiring to the people that are there, and also in terms of the halachas, you know, the details and the halachas, learning it, again, the details of exactly how to make kiddush. There's a lot of things that when we make kiddush, there are details that we may or may not get right, or the details of the Birkat Hamazon, the bench, whatever it might be. To pick one area that we already love and that we already are invested in, and go further, take it further, take it to another level. Okay. All right, folks. Have a wonderful week. Shavua Tov. See you all next week, and make sure to take advantage. We have a whole bunch of new classes. There's an email that's going to be going out this week with a new class schedule starting now. We're starting a Tuesday night program where every Tuesday night there's going to be a class at the center with a different teacher. There's going to be, I think, Rabbi and Eve are going to be the permanent regulars, and then there's the other two slots are going to alternate between other amazing, talented people in Chicago. That's going to be Tuesday nights. Allie's starting a new class on Mondays. Starting, I think, in a couple of weeks, she's starting a class on the wisdom of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. That's going to be Mondays at noon. So when she finishes Pirkei Avot. So yeah, make sure to pay attention to what's going on. There's a lot of great things going on.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Where am I?
David.
Thank
Hannah asked
you.
where I am.
Beautiful
You're so
class.
welcome. I'm in the Malcha Mall in Jerusalem. Malcha, Canyon Malcha. My in-laws are here. My in-laws are in town, which is absolutely amazing. And they're here, and Allie and my in-laws and Yosef are shopping, and they're actually now they're behind us. They came back.
Can we get Yosef on the screen for a second?
Yes. Let me see if I can get him in a second.
I'm jealous.
Yo, just gonna request to say quick along. He's here.
There he is.
Hey,
Shalom.
Yeah.
Shalom. All right, your dad can't hear us now, so we're looking for some real wisdom now from somebody. Can you put some wisdom on us?
Just tell me some bad words.
I'm trying to control my Yetzer Hara.
Yosef, how's